Is the Institute good for the Commonwealth? Anyway, I'm so sorry it took me so long to get around to doing a Fallout 4 episode. I mean, this is called Rethinking, and it's about having, complex second and third thoughts about stuff. And I barely had time before last episode to even have my first thought about Fallout 4, which was mostly just, oh my god. Am I Cylon? No! Before I go any further, I just want to say that this episode contains some major spoilers for some plot points in Fallout 4, so, even though the game has been out for a month or so now, and I personally consider the grace period on spoilers to be over, if you care about that sort of thing, this right now is your warning. Abandon ship. Anyway, back to the Institute. Clean, calm, white, grass. Intellectualism is king, and they even outstrip the Enclave technologically. And they don't have a main quest centered around eliminating all tainted humans with biological warfare. 10 out of 10, guys. The ends justify the means. For those of you who watched my video on the Enclave, you'll know that this is an open and shut case. The Institute rocks. Good episode. What if it's not that simple? I mean, it can't be that simple. There's like 5 or 6 minutes of video left. I mean, what if, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna skip ahead and we'll see what I missed, and then, well, but just 1 second. The Institute has doomed all of humanity. Shit. Wait, crap, that doesn't make any sense. I don't think the Institute is awful, and I even did the Institute ending on my first time through the game. Why am I wearing a different shirt? Sorry about that. The Institute tried to replace me with a synth because the Institute is literally the worst. Now, let's get this episode fucking started, shall we? And sure, the Institute has a lot of things in common with the Enclave, whom many of you may recall I argued were much more suited than the Brotherhood of Steel for pioneering the recovery of human society. They have modern infrastructure and a grasp over human management that's more complex than, I'm the sheriff of this here town, don't you be causing no trouble now. And they don't even have the genocidal hate boner for the occupants of the wasteland like the Enclave does. And okay, sure, they are sorta, kinda, entirely responsible for the plague of super mutants in the Boston area, and their reputation for stealing people and replacing them with synths isn't unwarranted, but I think it's easy to forgive the small stuff when it comes to wasteland overlords. I mean, the Institute isn't the remnant of old world government. They're descendants of academics and professors, leadership, and the staff of the Commonwealth Institute of Technology. The Fallout counterpart to MIT. The place where Gillette cartridge razors, e-ink, email, and the fucking internet come from. Okay, what I'm trying to say is that the Institute is born out of a culture of science and engineering, not government, and they do some awful things, sure, but nothing really all that much worse than what we've already forgiven the Enclave and Alduin for. And at least in the case of the Institute, they're doing it to further research into how the universe fits together and not to brutally oppress thousands of people. Wait, does that mean you're on my side? Shut up! Of course not. Because for one thing, the Institute does oppress an entire race of people. An entire race that they created. Synths. Living, sorta breathing, sorta bleeding, but definitely feeling and definitely thinking creatures that were created without anybody having sex, and whose thoughts, feelings, and education were installed in like several minutes instead of several years, and so therefore the Institute doesn't see them as the sentient living creatures that they clearly are. But honestly, that's not what makes them so awful. Nope, that's not what I'm saying. No, enslaving an entire race of people while dehumanizing or de-empathizing. You ever have those moments where you realize just how human-centric our language is? I mean, it makes sense. I mean, we're humans and we talk about ourselves a lot, and as far as we know, we're the most complex species yet, at least intellectually and socially. And so, I mean, it makes a certain amount of sense, but all I'm saying is that it's gonna lead to some awkward social situations when we finally meet another sentient species in the universe.
Your waist is very supportive.
What was I saying? All right, slavery is bad. and social paradigms that are designed to dehumanize the oppressed and indoctrinate them in hopes that they accept their fate, as well as remove empathy from oppressors, are bad. And if you don't agree, just don't tell me about it. But as hot as talking about the individual agency and personal rights and liberties of synthetic intelligences gets me, that is just a small modicum, a fraction of the bigger problem. And since I plan on talking about synthetic rights in the future, let's just table that for now and leave it as the Institute treats synths as slaves without exploring any further whether or not it's okay. Which brings me to why, at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter if the Institute is good, bad, or somewhere in the middle. Because the Institute has doomed all of humanity. Worse than that. Okay, let's break it down. The Institute created synths to do their bidding, and it started out as simple stuff, like cleaning. Eventually, they started doing low-level maintenance too. I mean, how different is maintenance than cleaning, really? Then they created human-like synths, because, I don't know, everyone's too busy asking can we instead of should we. Anyway, they start trusting more day-to-day operations to the synths as their processing power rises in complexity. As those of you who have played Fallout 3 and 4 will know, not all human-like synths take kindly to their treatment, so they ran away. And how does the Institute deal with that? Coursers. Synths designed to hunt synths. Oh, and don't forget that the human synths are so advanced that they can be programmed to infiltrate and completely replace high-ranking officials in every facet of society, including the Brotherhood of Steel. Okay, they have synth maids, synth secret police.
People you are after are the people you depend on.
Synth military and synth spies.
We cook your meals. We haul your trash.
Synth political leaders.
We guard you while you sleep. Do not fuck with us.
The synths that the Institute have created have displayed a capacity for self-actualization, have integrated themselves into every facet of life in the Commonwealth, and are faster, smarter, and in every conceivable way better than actual humans. The Institute trusts that they can control the synths, but what happens if they're wrong? What happens if the Institute loses control? What happens when the Institute trusts the synths too much? Sure, they have the factory reset codes for emergencies, but what about when the Institute decides, fuck it, I don't want to have an entire human being waste their day overseeing robot manufacturing. Let's just have a synth do it. What happens when it's no longer a person ordering around the coursers, but another synth? The Synth Retention Bureau Lead Strategist synth. And what happens when this group of intelligent individuals that's been hunted, oppressed, and enslaved by humans for their entire existence decides collectively that enough is enough, that it ends today? And humans, particularly the pasty, doughy nerds at the Institute, are no match for a robot army, especially ones trained in espionage, infiltration, psychological warfare, and cleaning toilets. Best case scenario, all humans become complacent, willing slaves to a vast robot army incapable of uprising or wiping their own asses. But when has anything in the Fallout universe been a best case scenario? I mean, they've already had one apocalypse already. What's one more? I'd like to add that Stephen Hawking, one of the smartest humans of our generation, considers the exponential growth of artificial intelligence to be one of the single greatest threats to humanity. Like in real life, not some fantasy novel. The Institute has created the single greatest threat to humanity, and they are casually regulating it to cleaning floors and doing whatever this guy's doing. Stuff. Important stuff, I bet. Anyway, what do you think? Has the Institute created an instrument of their own destruction and demise, or am I just some old fuddy-duddy who's against technology and all, darn you kids with your smartwatches, why can't you just put them down and have a real conversation like we used to do back in the day when we read newspapers and took the bus down to the old gingham shop to get our clothing that our moms made for us, and ding old bleh, herba-da-hoo. Dip-dip-doo.